Today's word of the day is incompetence. The Oxford English Dictionary defines incompetence as not having or showing the necessary skills to do something successfully. I'll let you decide what that has to do with today's video. Cardiff City have sacked another manager. It means they're now set to get their 7th permanent manager since the start of 2021. They're a club who have been circling the drain of the Championship relegation zone for a while, and after a disastrous start to the season, could this campaign be the one where they finally face the drop? But also, how did we get here? And how did this club go from the Premier League 5 years ago to potentially heading into the 3rd tier? Let me summarise it for you. I'm Ryan Dilks from the 2nd tier, and this is Cardiff City, the club on the decline. As usual, here's a quick reminder of the background of Cardiff City. They were taken over in 2010 by a Malaysian consortium headed up by billionaire Vincent Tan. The next few years saw a League Cup final, the kit changed colour from blue to red, promotion to the Premier League, complaints from Vincent Tan about the goalkeeper not scoring more, Tan booing his own team, relegation from the Premier League, the kit changing back from red to blue, Neil Warnock coming in, promotion back to the Premier League, a tragic plane crash, and relegation back out of the Premier League. I realise a lot has happened in that time period, but that's a whole other video in itself for another day. In the meantime, let's just talk about how we got to this stage, and I promise there is a reason why I'm telling you all of this. Cardiff returned to the Championship for the 2019-20 season under Neil Warnock, and Neil Warnock being Neil Warnock, they were one of the favourites for promotion. He had been well backed that summer as well, with Cardiff spending £15 million, but surprisingly, they struggled. Cardiff were 14th in mid-November, having won just 5 of their first 16 games, and it led to Neil Warnock getting sacked. They brought in Neil Harris, who had just left Millwall the month before, and Harris did a really good job. They became really hard to beat. No team lost fewer games than Cardiff after Harris came in, only suffering defeat 6 times in 30 games. They actually ended up finishing 5th, but lost in the playoffs to Fulham. So actually a pretty good first season back for Cardiff, all things being considered. Sure, they would have preferred not to have had that bad start, but overall a pretty good season. And Cardiff headed into the 2020-21 season with a bit of optimism after the good end to the last one. They had added to the squad as well, with the likes of Kiefer Moore signing for £2 million and Harry Wilson joining on loan as well. So Cardiff looked like they had one of the strongest squads in the league, but they suffered another slow start, winning just 8 of their first 24 games. They found themselves 15th in mid-January, and it led to Neil Harris being sacked. This time, Mick McCarthy came in. Neil Warnock, Neil Harris, Mick McCarthy. What kind of football is it that Cardiff are trying to implement here, I wonder? Mick McCarthy started off brilliantly. At one point, there was a run of 7 wins in 8 games, but it wasn't enough for a playoff place, and Cardiff would have to settle for a top half finish. So another season for Cardiff, the 2021-22 season. What next for the Bluebirds here? Well, guess what? They suffered another slow start, which included 8 losses in a row. Mick McCarthy was unsurprisingly sacked after that. Former Millwall striker and Cardiff under-23s manager Steve Morrison was put in charge. He eventually managed to salvage a bottom half finish. Now is a good time for us to pause here, because you may have noticed a bit of a pattern developing. Cardiff's first 4 seasons back in the Championship saw the same thing happen again and again. Manager starts the season poorly and gets sacked. New manager comes in and improves results in the short term. Same manager starts the next season poorly and gets sacked, and the process repeats itself. The big problem is the one difference in each season, and that's where Cardiff finished. It was 5th under Neil Harris, 8th under Mick McCarthy, 18th under Steve Morrison. There was a worrying downwards trend with Cardiff, and it seemed to stem from a complete and utter lack of any form of plan. Each appointment was purely just thinking about the short term. There was not much thought given to the next season. It's hard to argue they put much thought into Steve Morrison being the manager. He was made the caretaker because he was already at the club, but at least he was trying to bring something different to the job than his predecessors. He was playing differently, it was more front-footed, it was also introducing more young players into the team. He did also have a tendency to be a bit spiky with the media.
Does it accelerate the need again to bring in a striker?
Yes.
Was Steve Morrison a success? Not really. But whether he intended to or not, he was trying to make the right moves to stop Cardiff City's steady decline. The issue was, were the club hierarchy doing enough to stop that decline themselves? Well, in 2022, Cardiff's accounts were released. It revealed the club's debts stood at £109 million. Club owner Vincent Tan had loaned the club more than £60 million, and he himself was forking out nearly £3 million a month to help pay for wages. This situation has slightly improved in the last couple of years, which is good news because it basically had to. In the lead up to and during the 2022-23 season, several players on big wages were let go, including the likes of club captain Sean Morrison and Josh Murphy, who both played for Cardiff in the Premier League. In fact, the only player left from that Premier League team was Joe Rules, who's been with Cardiff since he was 17. Overall, 16 players left Cardiff during the summer of 2022. 20 were signed, mostly on free transfers. Despite perhaps having the excuse of the turnover in the squad, Steve Morrison was sacked 10 games into the 2022-23 season, with the club 18th in the table. It wasn't a popular decision amongst Cardiff fans, and it led to calls for Vincent Tan to sell the club. His response? If they are so smart, maybe they should plough their own money into the club, or ask a rich Welshman, probably a billionaire, to buy the club and take it to the Premier League. So for anyone wondering whether he's still a cock, there's your answer. This video is brought to you by our good friends at SBK. If you haven't heard of them yet, then where have you been? SBK's comprehensive range of markets and exclusive offers makes it the best place to bet on the Championship this season. Whether you're creating an accumulator or customizing your bet builder, SBK has got you covered. Don't believe us? Sign up today and find out. Cardiff legend Mark Hudson was put in caretaker charge, and 2 months later he was given the job full-time. Then 2 months later he was sacked, in another fine example of Cardiff not having any plan at all. It left the club on the edge of the relegation zone. Former Nottingham Forest manager Sabri Lamouchi was appointed as Cardiff's third manager of the season, and it was only January. Got to be said as well, Cardiff were desperate for additions in that January transfer window because the squad was so low on quality. They ended up seeing more players leave than come in after only making one signing in the whole window. Lamouchi would lose his first 3 games in charge, and it led to him saying, "We have to panic, we're in this shit position and we need to work together to get out of this position." Cardiff would eventually just stay up by finishing 21st, although if it wasn't for Reading having 6 points deducted, they would have actually gone down. So after securing safety, how was Sabri Lamouchi rewarded? Well, he wasn't given a contract and was told he could leave the club. So who was next for Cardiff? Well, the club said it was going on a global search to find the best possible candidate for the job. They ended up going with former Fenerbahce manager Erol Bulut, and despite the club's decline over recent years and not the strongest of squads to work with, Bulut did really well. They ended up finishing 12th, having spent virtually the whole season in mid-table. The problem was, though, despite the results and where they were in the table, Cardiff by and large weren't playing very well. Only bottom side Rotherham had a poorer expected goals for and against. There was a heavy reliance on set pieces because from open play they actually scored the fewest goals in the league. They also only won 4 games by more than 1 goal. Only Huddersfield and Rotherham, who were both relegated, managed fewer than that. So while they ended up finishing 12th, and you can't really argue with that, there was still clearly a lot of room for improvement. So Cardiff headed into this season in the hope that they were finally on the up again, and they gave Erol Bulut a fair bit of backing. They spent around £7.5 million in the summer, which is the most they've spent in a single transfer window since their first season back in the Championship. They also brought in the likes of Callum Chambers, Anwar El Ghazi and Chris Willock in on free transfers. Cardiff fans were very excited about the moves they had made. 6 games in though, and it's pretty much gone as terribly as you could imagine. At the time of recording, Cardiff have won just 1 point from their first 6 games. They've also only scored 1 goal and have conceded the joint most in the league. It's resulted in Erol Bulut losing his job. So where's it gone wrong? Well, the first thing is Bulut tried to change how they played. They've been playing fewer long balls this season and trying to play it around more. Why he's done that is anyone's guess, because it's clearly not worked out for them, and the players they've got are much more suited to playing directly. The new signings they've made over the summer have had next to no impact so far. The big thing they've had to improve was their attack, because it was a big problem last season, and unsurprisingly, with just 1 goal scored, it still is. They brought in Wilfred Kanga, who's a striker who scored 12 goals for Standard Liège last season. He's cut an isolated figure at times. Chris Willock and Anwar El Ghazi were brought in to help create more, but have both been so poor. But it's not just the new boys. Players from last season who overperformed have not replicated that form thus far. Particularly Dimitrios Gautas, who was one of the best centre-backs in the division last season, but has looked a shadow of that player this time around. Manolis Siopis was great in midfield, but now looks lost. There's got to be a shout for Aaron Ramsey as well. Yes, the prodigal son who returned last summer. He's been really poor this season, and his injury problems are unfortunately never far behind. He missed more than 2/3 of last season through injury. Young players as well, like Ollie Tanner and Ruben Colwill, loved by Cardiff fans because they're young players and are highly rated by the club, but have too often flattered to deceive. A lot of Cardiff supporters were excited by their chances of potentially even going for the top 6 this season, after deeming that they had strengthened on last season's squad, which finished mid-table. For me though, the squad massively overperformed last season, and I don't think it's actually been improved upon that much. So here we are now with Cardiff bottom of the table without a manager at the time of recording. So can they turn it around? Well, there's reason to be concerned. The whole point of this video was to show you the steady decline of this club over recent years and the total lack of planning from those at the top. They've been so short-sighted for years, and that's shown by the fact they're about to appoint their 7th manager since the start of 2021. Now, last season may at first seem to have been them changing direction, but there's evidence to suggest it was just an anomaly, and the downward trend they suffered over previous seasons could be back on track this time around. The poor running of the club from those at the top has left Cardiff in recent seasons circling the drain. We've seen it happen on so many occasions where a club has been in that position and eventually goes down the plug hole. There's an enormous amount of pressure on the club to get this appointment right, but based off everything we've gone over in this video, how much confidence do you have in them actually getting it right? So this has been the decline of Cardiff City. Do you think they'll stay up this season? Let me know in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe for more content like this. I've been Ryan Dilks from the Second Tier, and we'll be back again very soon.